طيب بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. I commence in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most sublime, the only one worthy of all worship, all praise, all glorification. I send salutations of prayers and peace upon the finality of prophets and messengers, Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, upon his family, his companions, and all who follow him in righteousness until the day of judgment. Indeed, beloved brothers and sisters, the best speech is the book of Allah Jalla wa Ala, the Quran. And the best guidance is the guidance of Muhammad salawatullahi wassalamuhu alayhi. Today, inshallah ta'ala, brothers and sisters, we are going to be journeying, inshallah ta'ala, into our third marriage course. So the first course, which was about 10 or 11 lectures, dealt with how to get married, finding a spouse, the do's and the don'ts, the wali, the walima, etc., etc. The second focused on the Prophet in his household, the Prophet, mashallah, as a husband, the wives of the Prophet, sallallahu alayhi, as, mashallah, women and wives. And we learned the 5 love languages in order to be able to enhance our marriages, inshallah ta'ala, because the purpose of all of these courses and classes is that we want to enhance our marriages. We want to better our marriages. We don't want to be part of the statistic where marriage has been breaking down, and we have, subhanAllah, over a 50% divorce rate now amongst us as Muslims, right? Subhanallah, and it's greater than that. And we want to be able to change that around and dissect some of why this is happening, unfortunately. And we are going to be looking at a book, mashallah, barakallahu fiha, that Sister Susie Ismail. And my hopes is that at the end of these sessions, we can bring her on for a Q&A dialogue, inshallah, back and forth regarding what made her write this book, inshallah ta'ala, and mashallah, what are some of the things or the follow-ups after this book that she has done, inshallah, in trying to help, right, better marriages and better remove the misnomer that we can't talk about our problems in Islam. And subhanallah, there's a statement that says we live in the shelter of each other. We live in the shelter of each other. And in order to understand this statement, I want to take it back to the Quran, right? Because the Quran is our source of guidance and light. And when we take it back to the Quran, Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 187, Hunna libasun lakum wa antum libasun lahun, right? That your spouses are a garment for you and you are a garment for them. Right? So here we are sheltering one another. We are like pieces of clothing, inshallah ta'ala, that helps to protect the body. We know that clothing, depending on the different weather that is out there, winter, summer, fall, spring, we change our clothing. In the winter, we put on more clothes, we bundle up so that we can be protected from the sun, from the cold. In the summertime, we kind of take some stuff off, inshallah ta'ala. We don't wear as many things, inshallah ta'ala, but then we begin to protect ourselves from the sun, inshallah ta'ala. And the same thing is in marriage, that the husband and the wife, they are like these garments that are protecting the body. We are sheltering one another. We are helping to safeguard ourselves from the ills of this world, right? And to help one another toward the delights of the hereafter and paradise, inshallah. And ultimately, this is the love that everyone should be seeking, right? The love where two people are ultimately working to get into paradise and to be in that abode of happiness, to share with one another in this life all of the good things that we can do together that are going to cause us to do, mashallah, and spend much more time in that abode that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for his believing, submissive slaves. And this is a love that drives these individuals together to strive for the mercy of Allah, to strive for his pleasure, and to live in paradise forever, content and happy. Is this not true love? Is this not what we are looking for out of love? Or are we just looking for that emotional high where I feel good, mashallah, when you're with me, I feel good when you touch me, I feel good when you kiss me. But whether you're religious or not, whether you're faithful or not, whether, mashallah, you are a person of God or not, it really doesn't matter, because all I care about is that emotion of feeling good in that moment. But what happens when that emotion is gone? What happens when, mashallah, now we find ourselves in difficulty? How do we get past all of this, right? And this is why amid falling in love, amid seeking for love, wanting to be loved, at times we enter relationships, right? Because of that feeling that we initially have, and then things go awfully wrong. And sometimes, as we're going to see in today's story, we enter relationships with no knowledge of anything whatsoever, not even knowing the other person whom we are supposed to be marrying, subhanAllah. You know, when I read this story, it was just something that broke my heart and ripped it apart, knowing that this type of stuff still exists in the world, right? And because of that, we want to journey together this semester looking at this book written by our beloved sister Susie Ismail, titled When Marriage Fails, so that we can further analyze the 5 types of failed marriages that she brings forth in the book, and see how do we maneuver and not fall into those same mistakes and errors. We also want to analyze them and learn the lessons that are found within them, so that we can prevent making those same mistakes that others have already made. Often in our community of Muslims, many stones stay unturned, right? This is true. Many times in our community as Muslims, many stones stay unturned. And due to that, people consistently are hurt. People consistently suffer. People consistently go through immense trials because we don't like to talk about our shortcomings. There's a difference when speaking about our shortcomings and exposing people's personal shortcomings. When we talk about our shortcomings as an ummah, we are speaking of our shortcomings so that we can bring forth resolutions, solutions to our ever-growing problems, thereby tackling them head on and trying to eradicate and eliminate them from our lives, right? This is very different than me exposing your life, your mistakes, your errors personally because I have something that I want to harm you with, right? This is not the case. We're talking about an ill that is found in the ummah, and we can't allow ourselves, because of cultural barriers and upbringings and understandings, that we don't deal with the things that are destroying and are destructive to the relationships that we are trying to build and have with our spouses, inshallah ta'ala. And this is why it is necessary for the successful growth of our communities that we analyze these things, and more important, for the successful growth of our families, inshallah ta'ala, because in many instances, we're not just talking about husband and wife, but we're talking about children who are also affected by what happens between that husband and wife. The broken home syndrome is something very real. I can tell you, brothers and sisters, I've lived it. You know, my mom and my dad broke up when I was 10 years old. That was destructive to my life. It was destructive to my childhood. Alhamdulillah, Allah gave me faith and taught me how to maneuver through these different things eventually in life. But it is very real, inshallah ta'ala, and it is why we don't want to pass on those same negative traits or make or allow our children to go through those same negative things, inshallah ta'ala. So Sister Susie, she opens up her book with a very important verse, and we took this in the previous classes and courses, inshallah ta'ala, and it is used most of the time when two people get married. And it is the verse where Allah states in Surah Al-Rum, chapter 30, verse 21, وَمِنْ آيَاتِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. He says, and one of his signs is that he created for you from among yourselves spouses, so that you may find comfort in them. And he has placed between you mercy and compassion. Surely in this are signs for people who reflect and think. In this beautiful verse, Allah gives us a main purpose for marriage. He states that he created for you spouses so that you have someone to reside with, you have someone to talk to, you have someone to spend time with, right? None of this, he didn't give you a spouse so that you can abuse and hurt them. That wasn't the purpose. It's not in the Quran. He didn't say, I gave you a spouse so that when you feel bad, you can hurt them. No. He says, I gave you a spouse so that you can live with them in comfort and tranquility. Find mercy, subhana rabbil azim, right? And that he placed this mawadda and this rahmah, this mercy and this compassion between you two, right? And that it is a sign for those who ponder and reflect. Marriages can only succeed, brothers and sisters, with people who are willing to be reflective on where they are with their Lord first, then their faith, their spouse, and their family, right? You have to be able to reflect on these important things in your life. Your creator, your faith, Islam, which includes your Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, your spouse, the one who you have committed to, and then your children who also have a commitment to you, should have a commitment to you, right? SubhanAllah, you should have a commitment to them. And the most important of those relationships, first and foremost, is the relationship we have with our Lord, because it is what guides or what should guide our behaviors and interactions with one another. We choose ultimately what type of relationships we want to have. And if we want to live in tranquility, in compassion, and with mercy, right? This is a choice that each and everyone has the ability to make, right? We can achieve these things if we want them. They are not specific for some and not for others. Allah didn't say that it was for these people and not those. Allah says that this is what he has placed between spouses. This is general, is am, right? SubhanAllah. And those who don't find it really need to look at either their choices of partners, right? You either haven't found it because you chose a partner that it doesn't exist within them, or you need to look at yourself because maybe it doesn't exist within you. And you have to be honest with you, right? SubhanAllah. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm not, right? SubhanAllah. But these are conversations and reflections that need to take place. Now we'll move into the first part of the story that she brings, and it's about abuse and power struggle. And he said, today we're going to look at the story from the perspective of the wife. Next week, we'll look at the story from the perspective of the husband, and then the commentary that is made regarding the story. And we'll begin to dissect it week by week, inshallah ta'ala, in order to extract some benefits from it. So Sister Susie, she commences this chapter by writing, Islam prescribes that the completion of half the religion is through marriage, right? He says you have completed half your faith when you get married, and we heard this before. Yet in a perfect religion, the perfect union is not always one that is conceived. Our religion is perfect, but it doesn't necessarily mean that because the religion is perfect that now you're going to have a perfect marriage. That may not be the case, okay? And he says, unfortunately, the incidence of divorce and separation continues to climb exponentially across the world. And the Muslim community is not immune to this alarming rate of increase. However, she says, ignoring the problem rather than identifying and accepting it and looking the other way does not make this difficult predicament go away, okay? And that is an important point to understand. That if I close my eyes and I place my head in the sand, or I turn my back to the issue, it doesn't mean that the issue is not present. It means that I choose now to ignore the issue and not deal with it to bring about change, which now I am becoming part of the problem, right? Instead of part of the solution. She goes on to say, first, the acceptance of the truth that divorce is happening more and more frequently in the Muslim communities around the world is direly needed to precede a frank discussion of the topic, right? We have to first accept so before we can begin to talk about it. Second, only once an open dialogue is established and individuals begin to understand why divorce happens, can there be any movement towards a solution. We need to be able to dissect our problems and admit to them so that inshallah ta'ala we can understand why divorce is taking place. And then maybe inshallah ta'ala we can begin moving towards solutions, she mentioned. Ultimately, divorce is permissible in Islam. However, it is of the least loved of all permissibility in the religion. The woman in this story, her name is kept out. Her identity is kept out. We don't know what her identity is, but she begins the story by the end of her life, or like the moments of trouble and difficulty, and then she kind of rewinds and tells us about those moments, right? She starts off saying it always started the same way. Something would just set him off, meaning her husband, right? Sometimes it would be an involuntary glance from me, or it may have been the way I responded to a question he asked, or the way I set the table, or how much salt I put in the food. It took me years to realize that he did not need a reason to let his anger loose on me, subhanAllah. Unfortunately, it was too many years after I left him that I was able to come to this cathartic conclusion and could finally stop blaming myself for his violent predilections. She goes on saying, I know the tale may sound familiar. He fits the exact profile of the typical domestic abuser, whatever that might be. But I didn't see it, or at least I wouldn't open my eyes long enough to see it. Thinking back to when we first met, she says, I can honestly say that he acted the part of the good guy. She was raised in the US to devotedly Pakistani parents. She was not religious in her younger years, but began to find faith and practice that faith in the university that she attended. As she states, I did not really discover the true beauty of my religion until I entered the university. She shares that she took a class called Women in Islam that was taught by primarily non-Muslims, and it gave her another outlook on her faith and led her to explore more about her faith, realizing the staunch differences that existed between Islam and her culture, subhanAllah. And she says, at the top of the cultural practices in my family and from my people was arranged marriages, right? And this was something big in her culture. She states how her parents drove into her the idea of marriage when she was just a little girl, and that the glorious careers of being a doctor, an engineer, a pharmacist, a lawyer, etc., were reserved only for the boys of her household. She mentions how the double standards never really bothered her. She says she figured that she would always marry a doctor like her father, live in a 3,500 square foot home, mini mansion in the suburbs somewhere where she can cook biryani and fry her perfect little samosas in her kitchen that she would be living in. And she said that once the truth came about, what the girls in college, he says, once the truth came about regarding what the girls in college were actually doing, that many parents, and here she's referring to the Pakistani parents, began sending their daughters back overseas to Pakistan to get married, okay? So the girls obviously were out of pocket in college a little bit, and because of this, they were being sent back to Pakistan. She ended up being one of these girls, especially after her father felt pressure placed on him by friends who began bragging about marrying their daughters off who were 2 years younger than her. And they would tell him, remember that girls at the age of your daughter, they wither and they get old. And they become much harder to marry. She's 21. What are you talking about? Withering and getting old, subhanAllah, and being hard to marry. Allahu Akbar. She mentions how she didn't wear hijab during this period, but would dress very modestly. But that due to all of her friends, having weddings and the likes and getting married, that she began packing on the weight because of the food that she was eating at these weddings, and that her face began to break out in acne because of the makeup that she would put on when she would also attend these weddings. She said that her self-esteem began to drop, and even though she was only 21, she was looked at as an old maid in the eyes of her community and culture. She says, my parents were worried that I was waiting too long to be married, and they immediately took me to Pakistan to marry me off. And because she was an American citizen, she was a great catch, right? She had the blue passport, Allahu Akbar. And that meant that some man would now be able to come to the United States of America and leave Pakistan. She states that she was a hot commodity in Pakistan because of having this passport. She mentions how it took less than a week for her to find a husband. SubhanAllah, can you imagine how many sisters are looking for husbands right now? She found a husband in a week, right? She says she had heard all about her suitor, meaning the man who she was supposed to marry. But during the entire process, she was never allowed to see him. And the one time that she tried to sneak a peek at him, she told one of her friends to turn like a little mirror towards him while she was in the other room so that she could sneak a peek. She turned the mirror the wrong way and she wasn't able to see him, and it didn't work out in her favor. During the wedding party, this is her wedding party now. Mind you, she never spoke to the guy. She never had a conversation with him. She didn't know what he looked like. And now they are at the wedding party. Okay, subhanAllah. She says, I tried to sneak in a glance, right? Even at the wedding party, she hasn't yet taken a look at this man who's supposed to now be her husband, subhanAllah. And I was pleasantly surprised out the corner of my eye what I saw. She says he was lean, tall, and attractive. But he was a creepy 15 years older than I was, or something around that. She then thought about the Prophet Khadija radiallahu anhuma, and how the Prophet was 25 and Khadija was 40 when they got married, and she began to remove the thought of her marrying this old man. She returns to America, Subhana Rabbil Azim. She finishes her exams and she graduates. And by the time her physician husband, because he was a doctor back in Pakistan, arrives in America, they move in together, right? She mentions how she naively thought that they would move into that suburban neighborhood once he arrived, as she initially got them a place in the hood because that was all that she can afford with the money that was sent to her. She said that when they went to pick him up from the airport, that she was surprised and shocked. She said his hair was disheveled. His beard needed a trim. He had a terrible odor to him. And that this wasn't something that she saw on the night of her marriage to this man. He was tall, slim, good looking, smelt good. Now he arrives here in America. He's disheveled. His beard is not, properly taken care of, and he has an odor, subhanAllah. She says that when they got home, it was to the point where I couldn't stand the odor. She says, so I tried to tell him in Urdu where the bathroom was. And he took my message, unfortunately, the wrong way and interpreted it differently than what I intended, and completely misunderstood me. And all of a sudden, I found myself pinned underneath this man, gasping for clean air for a total of 3 minutes as he fulfilled his passions, and his passions were utterly spent. A'udhu billah. Only after that did he walk to the shower silently. I was confused, she says, about this interaction, which seemed like nothing I read about in novels or seen in movies. After showering, he comes back out of the shower smelling exactly as he went in, right? Subhanallah. And I had to hold back from gagging. Subhanallah Rabbil Azim. He looked at the food I prepared for him and he pushed it away and pointed at his feet, meaning that he wanted me to massage his feet. And I began to feel that we were not heading down the path of an Islamic marriage. Allahu Akbar. She said a month passed by and he was finding it difficult to get his medical degree because he had to retake exams, fellowships, residencies, and the likes. He didn't like me working, she stated, so I had to stay home and he took a job as a busboy. And he slowly began to withdraw from the society and he began to withdraw me from the society. And soon enough, I no longer saw my friends. I no longer saw my family. And the relationship with my mother was strained and even ruined. Allahumma musta'an. He eventually stopped praying and listening to Quran. Allahu Akbar. 3 months after being married was the first time that he hit me. Her brother had given her some money and she went to spend it on herself. She began to tell him about her trip in the mall and the blouse that she bought and some complaints I had about money, she said, and about the apartment we were living in. He says, before I could realize it, his hand was connecting to my jaw, to my stomach, and my face. And the only time he stopped hitting me was when I ended up vomiting on his face, as my screams would not even cause him to cease hitting me. A'udhu billahi min sharri shaitan. He then carried her mangled body to the shower. I want you, brothers and sisters, to picture this. This is a true story, okay? This isn't a fairy tale. This is true. He carried her mangled body to the shower and he bathed her with tenderness and softness, as she never perceived from him prior to that moment. He cried, he apologized for what he did, and she obviously forgave him. SubhanAllah. And she began to blame herself, thinking that maybe it was something that she had done and caused him to beat her, subhanAllah. She avoided her parents until her bruises healed. He was good for some time and tried to make up for it by buying flowers and treating her well for the next 3 or so weeks. She went on to state how she grew apart from her parents in order to please him. She was looking to hold on to the tenderness he showed after beating her, subhanAllah, right? She's looking for this man who now was so soft and kind to her after he beat it and pummeled her, right? SubhanAllah. And she wanted to make him happy. Barely 2 months passed before the next beating took place. He pulled her hair from the roots, tore her clothes off in a violent fury, and she suffered a concussion from her head being smashed into the wall. The excuses I kept coming as I kept making excuses for him with the periodic and frequent beating he gave me with intensity. SubhanAllah. For almost 3 years, she said, I hid behind closed doors in the ramshackle apartment. She said, I kept the house spotless. My cooking improved. I tried to answer his every beck and call, yet things were never enough for him. She stated that the year after their anniversary, he gave her another beating for going to the supermarket. And soon after, she went to the doctor's office and found out that she was pregnant. And the doctor who she saw paid no attention to her, where he wasn't able to see that she was an abused and battered wife. She said, after that, I tried not to anger him during my pregnancy until one day when I was around 7 months pregnant, she asked him to touch her belly because the baby was moving around. And he got so happy when he felt the baby moving and he yelled, oh, my son will be strong like me. She said, suddenly something snapped within me. And I didn't want my child to be strong like him. I didn't want my child to be capable of the violence that his father rained down upon me. She shoved his hand away and shouted, "This is my baby girl. She will not have your horrible temper or your mean ways." She said that was all it took to set him off. He flung her into the window, shattering the glass, and began to beat her as she felt the blood running down her face and down her legs. Allahumma musta'an. She said it was the first time that she screamed unabashedly. First time she screamed out for help. The neighbors heard her scream and they called the ambulance. And she was rushed to the hospital where she lost her baby. And the police took him away. She said, 10 years after burying my daughter, I am still hurting emotionally. Even though my physical scars have healed, my emotional scars have not. She mentions how the slightest bad odor she smells reminds her of him. She is still plagued with nightmares of the beatings that he would give her. She ends by praying for all abused Muslim women in abused marriages. And she says, a marriage built on abuse and power struggle is not a Muslim marriage. And getting out in many instances is the only real way to survive. She said, a marriage built on abuse and power struggles is not a Muslim marriage. And getting out in many instances is the only real way to survive, because this man almost killed her. Beloved brothers and sisters, when we look at this story, which makes me angry and upset, sad, hurt, and I begin to look at the different points, the first point that I look at is that we need to stop hiding these things due to our culture. All of that you're going to destroy our family name, the hell with your family name, okay? The heck with your family name. I couldn't care about your family name when people are being abused and mistreated in this manner. Divorce, of course, is something disliked, but nonetheless, it is permissible, especially in cases like this. In cases like this, it becomes necessary, right? And sometimes obligatory to divorce because you're trying to save the life of an individual who's being abused. We need to remember that the less we discuss these types of relationships or these relationship failures in our ummah, the least we will be able to repair and fix the mistakes. Hiding it does more harm than benefit, brothers and sisters. We cannot continue to sweep things under the rug because we think our religion is going to look bad, or we think our people are going to look bad, or our family. Forget about all of that. Our religion is perfect and pure. It's never going to look bad. If your family isn't going to look bad, then perhaps maybe they should look bad, especially if they're hiding and doing these types of things. The second, inshallah ta'ala, as I want to open the floor up, I got 10 points really quick. We need to really separate these staunch barriers of culture that go against the very fabric of Islam, okay? Stop thinking that these things are from our faith when they're not, especially the issue of arranged marriages, to the point that two people intended to get married did not even know one another, have never saw each other. How do you marry someone you've never saw at all? Someone you've never said a word to? How is it that that marriage is going to work? You can be marrying a psychopath like this woman was. As a father, how can you marry your daughter off to someone like that, right? And especially finding this person in a week. How much information as a parent could you have gained, inshallah ta'ala, about this man that you're about to give your daughter to? Number 3, women need to be encouraged to higher education. All of this that higher education is for the boys and not the girls is nonsense, okay? It is not just a place for the man, but it is a place where women need to be so that they can assure that they can take care of themselves and their children in the event of a bad marriage, just like this one, or the loss of a spouse. Because what are they going to do? They're going to go to welfare. They're going to go to the government. They're going to go somewhere else and depend on somebody else to take care of them. No, they need to be educated so that, inshallah, they can be empowered and be able to take care of themselves if need be, right? And we mentioned in the past that this shouldn't be a point of a power struggle that takes place in the house over wealth. If your husband can afford for you to stay home and you're okay with that, then inshallah you can stay home and mashallah be the wife at home and let your husband pay for the bills. If you are the woman who doesn't want to stay home, sister, you don't have to. You can inshallah find that person who will agree that inshallah ta'ala he can have a wife that works. And if he says that's not what he wants, then you can move on until you find the one who does, right? And this is why talking and communicating and getting to know what this person looks for and what this person desires in his life and how he's going to maneuver the rest of his life that you're supposed to be included in is so important. Number 4, women are given the right to decide whom they want to marry, okay? It is their choice. They have the right to see that person, to speak with them, and ultimately to decide if they are the ones whom they want to marry. Anything outside of that is oppression, okay? Yes, your family can be oppressing you. It is injustice and it is incorrect, okay? Islamically speaking, she should be able to make that decision on her own and say, I want to marry fulan or fulan. Yes, as a parent, you can suggest, you can give your opinion, you can give your advice. At the end of the day, it is her choice. And she shouldn't be forced to marrying someone whom she does not want to marry, inshallah ta'ala. But homework needs to be done, as we've talked about in the past. Number 5, parents need not to pressure their children into marriage or out of marriage, right? Not into marriage or out of marriage, because we've seen both. They need to be the ones to choose, meaning the children, what they want to do. And our jobs as parents is to constantly advise with wisdom and love, thereby guiding our beloved children to hopefully making good choices for themselves and not for us. The person they're marrying is not for us, right? If they marry a person with status, that's not for us. Because oftentimes it's marry the doctor so that our family, mashallah, can maintain status. Forget all that nonsense. Marry the person who's going to take care of you, love you, be faithful, and have a relationship with the Lord, inshallah ta'ala. Number 6, you don't need to marry people of status, but marrying people of faith is what is extremely important. Some may say, but Imam, we see other scholars and Imams doing the same thing. My response is, just because someone else has called them an Imam or called them a scholar does not mean that they are living according to scholarship or Islam. Rather, they can be the furthest away, and it is the reason that they are the first to be questioned on the day of judgment regarding what they have done with the knowledge that Allah has given them and how they held on to this responsibility, and what was it for, to be seen, to be known, or was it sincerely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Remember that even Imams and scholars are human beings. They're not perfect. They're not angels. So they are by far not the measuring stick. The measuring stick is the Quran and the Sunnah, the revelation of God. Number 7, men, putting your hands on your wives, physically abusing them is a no-no. It's a no-no. Keep your hands to yourself. Sisters, do not hide this from your parents, from your brothers, from your uncles, and do not put up with anyone putting their hands on you. Okay? Islamically, beating your wife, hitting her in the face, punching her in the stomach until she vomits. That stuff is not permissible in our faith. I hope that's clear. And sisters, please reach out to your fathers and let them know. And if your fathers don't care what your husband is doing to you, wal-iyadu billah, may Allah, la samah Allah, I can't even imagine that if my daughter was to call me and tell me, Papi, my husband placed his hands on me and physically hurt me, I would say he better wish and hope that the police make it over to the house before I do. Because if they don't make it to the house before I do, Allahu musta'an, Allah knows best what's going to happen, right? Because that is my daughter who I'm going to protect with my life, subhanAllah. And putting your hands on her, it's a no-no, okay? Sisters, call the police immediately when it happens. Don't let it linger. As soon as he, call the police. Don't fall for the, baby, I'm so sorry. I love you. Break down in tears, cry, buy flowers. Forget all that nonsense, okay? Love should not hurt, not physically, okay? Sometimes emotionally it hurts, but love should not physically hurt, okay? Not at all. I don't care how romantic the joker is after the beating, okay? That is not the way you demonstrate love to another person. You don't beat them and then all of a sudden you have the most romantic, passionate love you've ever made in your life. That's psychotic. That's a person who got issues mentally that needs to go see a doctor and perhaps takes medication and perhaps needs to be behind bars and in cells, put away for a long time. Don't put up with it. Number 8, parents, you need to make sure that your children who are married are okay in those relationships. I'm not telling you to be nosy and to interfere in the relationships, especially in places that you should not, but be nosy enough to assure that your daughter is not being abused, especially if you gave her to some complete stranger in marriage that you should not have given her to. Number 9, I don't care how frustrated, brothers, your wife makes you. I don't care what nerve she hit. I don't care what button she pushed. Violence is never, ever acceptable. No matter how annoying and frustrating she may be, get over it, Ahi. Get over it and move on. And if you can't get over it, then move out. Get divorced. But don't put your hands on the sister. Number 10, we need to learn to ask for help. Brothers and sisters, I can't stress this point enough. We need to learn to ask for help. We need to know that getting help is good. We need to know that seeing a therapist in some cases is mandatory, in other cases needed, and in some recommended. You are not alone. Never think that you are. Maybe you don't get the response you're seeking from someone you've reached out to because of many things. Maybe that person is busy. Maybe they don't know the intensity of what you're going through because it hasn't been communicated to them that way so that they can drop everything and give you their full attention, right? But if that is the case, inshallah ta'ala, and you can't get that person who you're reaching out to for help to respond, go down the list to the next person and make sure that you keep moving down that list until a person responds. And at the top of that list, when it comes to abuse, physical abuse, is to make sure you call the police and don't allow yourselves to be abused by any man, inshallah ta'ala. Because in some cases, this could mean saving your life. And in other cases, it could mean saving the life of your children as well. Unfortunately, we have crazy people living in the world at times, and sometimes spouses take out their entire families, right? Spouses sometimes harm their families. We've seen the stuff of throwing acid in the face of the women and all of this other stuff that takes place in some of these countries. All of that stuff is not permissible, brothers and sisters. These are my 10 points, inshallah ta'ala, that I wanted to add to the conversation. as we don't want to elongate the class much more, but I want to open up the floor. If there's anybody who has comments, questions, like always, inshallah ta'ala, you can feel free to, you know, unmic yourself here if you're with us in the Zoom and ask your question that way. You can feel free to send me a private message, inshallah ta'ala. If you need to private message me and you feel that it needs to be private, you can do that through Zoom as well by clicking on my name and doing a direct message. Or you can also place the question openly in the chat box, inshallah ta'ala. So the floor is open. The same thing for the brothers and sisters who may be on Zoom, inshallah. You can also write it in the chat box on Zoom and we can deal with the questions from there, inshallah ta'ala. So the floor is open, inshallah ta'ala. And don't be afraid to engage, inshallah ta'ala. And I'll give it a moment just in case someone is typing, because I can't see if someone is typing or not, before I would know if there's any questions or any comments or any experiences that you may want to share, inshallah ta'ala, as well. You know, sometimes sharing an experience may save someone else's life, inshallah ta'ala. So, inshallah. Let's see. I have here a direct message. Hold on. Bismillah. One of our sisters said, may Allah give all the sisters in an abusive marriage shifa and heal their pain. Ameen. May Allah not only give them shifa and heal their pain, but may Allah, inshallah ta'ala, remove them from that marriage, inshallah ta'ala, altogether, and protect them from being harmed, you know, or harmed any further, inshallah ta'ala. Ameen. We have a direct message that came in. What can we as an ummah do to help our fellow brothers and sisters to move forward, to move toward a mindset of caring less of what people think and more of what Allah thinks about their actions? You know, we have to honestly do things like this. We have to have dialogues. We have to have talk shows. We have to have, you know, we have to put this on the radar more. You know, we have to have people come forward and begin to talk about these things that may seem strange and odd and things that people don't want to talk about, inshallah ta'ala, because as you mentioned, inshallah, you know, it doesn't matter what people think about me. What matters is what Allah thinks. And if Allah knows that I'm an abuser, I'm someone who is an oppressor, I'm someone who's physically harming my wife and my children, then inshallah ta'ala, that is worse than whatever the people know about me, because the people are not going to do anything to me at the end of the day, for the most part, right? You know, I could probably end up in jail or whatever have you. But when I meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the punishment that you have waiting for you, subhanAllah, for being this abusive, you know, man who maybe never repented and turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asked sincerely for help, right? Because a person who has done that in the past, I'm not saying they can't change, right? It's possible they can change, right? And we hope that they would change, inshallah ta'ala. But it takes, you know what I mean, a lot of sacrifice on their part, because they need to go see a psychologist, a therapist. They need to go ahead and get help, right? And perhaps that may have to be done by not being in the life of this person for some time, inshallah ta'ala. And if that person is willing to forgive them after they've proven that they've gotten some help and really changed, then perhaps maybe they can continue in the marriage, inshallah ta'ala, and Allah knows best, right? But sometimes, as she mentioned about her story, she says, you know, I have nightmares. The emotional pain never goes away, subhanAllah, right? And she says, perhaps if I didn't end up in the hospital, I probably would have stayed with this man and continued taking the beatings, right? And perhaps it would have ended in her death, right? So we need to really bring these things out to the forefront, inshallah ta'ala, dialogue and converse about it more, inshallah, so that we can remove that negative stigma, and Allah knows best. And I hope that, you know, those of you who are here with me, inshallah ta'ala, can come up with ways as well, you know, and send them to us. You know, we're bold enough, alhamdulillah, to go out there and do what we have to do to make sure that we begin to remove this stigma. Maybe some other people are not bold enough to go ahead and want to take that stand. But if you have an idea and think that, this can work and we should start doing A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, we're bold enough to go ahead and make that stand, inshallah ta'ala, if you don't want to do it, or we're bold enough to stand alongside you and make it happen, inshallah ta'ala, because at the end of the day, we only care about what Allah thinks and we don't care about what the people think. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if everyone in the world came together to harm you, they'll only be able to do whatever Allah allows. And if they came together to benefit you, they'll only be able to do whatever Allah allows, right? So at the end of the day, is looking to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worrying about what Allah is thinking and how Allah is going to hold us accountable for our actions, inshallah. The sister says, how does this cultural raid come about, especially in Islamic countries? Unfortunately, culture and Islam has been so intertwined in some countries that many people don't know the difference, unfortunately, right? Until they begin to learn Islam. Because the reality is, just because a person is Muslim doesn't mean that they know about their faith. So because of that, these things happen culturally and they become norms. And then what you see is that in the media, we're portrayed as these evil, wicked, harmful people who beat their men who beat their women and abuse their women, throw acid in the face of women and girls, because of whatever, because of maybe a sin that they have did. Because the same thing takes place with the girls, that if they commit sin, the father feels so ashamed that his family name is going to be ruined that he decides to throw acid in the face of his daughter. Where is that found in Islam? Do you think that was going to guide her and straighten her out? Or sitting down and having a conversation with her. Listen, I remember the first time I came home drunk, right? This is before Islam. I remember the first time I came home drunk. My father found the bottle cap in my pocket, right? Because I was drunk. He found the bottle cap in my pocket because he was trying to help me. My father, the next day, didn't beat me. He didn't yell at me. He didn't scream. He didn't kick me out the house. He sat me down and he had a concerned conversation with me as a parent and began to analyze where I was in my life with alcohol, the streets, and the likes, so that he can be able to guide me so that he doesn't lose his son, right? And this is how we're supposed to be, inshallah ta'ala, as parents. This is how we're supposed to be as spouses. It's not about me. I'm not going to change you physically. I have to try to guide you with words. And unfortunately, sometimes, shaitan gets involved and our anger, rages. And sometimes we, subhanAllah, end up doing things that maybe we shouldn't do, inshallah ta'ala, right? So, we definitely have to talk more about what's Islam and what's culture, right? What's culture and what's not Islam, so that we can begin to separate between the two, inshallah ta'ala, and know that these two don't exist in the same world together. There's some things culturally that Islamically, it's okay, it's no problem, right? But then there's some things that are unacceptable, inshallah ta'ala. One of our other sisters said, is it not hard again after such a hard marriage to marry again, subhanAllah, and how to handle it, how to create new feelings, how to restart, how to have hope, etc. SubhanAllah. Sister, I can't imagine that it would be easy moving on. It can't be. How do you move on after being physically beat to that state? SubhanAllah, almost thrown out of a window, almost killed. Your baby was killed and murdered because of the beating you took. These are scars that will probably require years and years of therapy, and sitting down and talking to somebody. And as she mentioned, she said, I got over my physical scars, but not my emotional ones. And what happens is that when that person tries to move on and get married, then naturally that baggage from her first marriage comes into the second marriage. And maybe the second marriage, the guy is a great guy, but you can't blame her for her, for her holding back or for her being nervous when something happens, or when he gets upset, maybe being scared, right? Because of the experience that she went through. And, subhanAllah, I can't imagine that how difficult it must be, someone wanting to find love and move on and not being able to because someone stole that from them, right? And that's what it is at the end of the day. Somebody stole that from them, unfortunately, right? And all we can do is make dua for them, that Allah heal their hearts, and that Allah heal their souls, and that they're able to find some tranquility to be able to move on, whether that is remaining by themselves and never marrying again, or finally one day being able to open up and marry again, inshallah ta'ala. But it's going to take sacrifice on their side, and it's going to take sacrifice on the new spouse's side. And I think those are things that if that person was going to get married a second time, I think that would have to be revealed, right? Because that woman may be sensitive in a lot of areas, and she may require a husband who's going to recognize that he needs to be sensitive in those areas, maneuvering with her, inshallah ta'ala. And that there may be certain things that trigger moments and bring her back to those moments of negativity and those moments of hurt and pain in her life. And then he would have to figure out how to deal with them. So he may have to even go to therapy with her, right? So that he can figure out how to maneuver when he runs into those types of situations, because she's going to have PTSD, right? She's going to have post-traumatic stress syndrome, right? It's without a doubt, in my mind, subhanAllah. And Allah knows best. There's a private message. I have seen that some sisters stay in a bad marriage because there are children involved and the man threatens to take the children away. What is your advice to sisters going through this? Ultimately, I tell sisters that are in bad marriages and they are threatened with the man taking their children away, that don't be scared. Honestly, you live here in America, especially those who live in America. In America, your children will never be taken away from you. If you're not on crack, if you're not on drugs, if you're not an alcoholic, if you're not, subhanAllah, if you're not a woman who's running out in the streets, leaving your children home alone, it is difficult for a father to get custody of the child. You have to be a mother who has abandoned your children altogether. The judge is always going to place that child in the house of the mother first and foremost, inshallah ta'ala, because ultimately the mother is not like the father, right? And the father is not like the mother, unfortunately. The father is very busy, and for the most part, the mother is going to be able to care and give that child the care they needs, and the court recognizes this, subhanAllah. So I say, don't worry, don't be scared. Don't stay in an abusive relationship just because of your children, because you have to remember that you in that relationship are not the only one going through trauma, but your children are also going through trauma, right? Your children are going through the trauma with you. Maybe they're not being hit and beat, but they may hear your screams, they may hear your cries, they may see the scars, they may see, the pain, they may see the emotional hurt, and that affects them as well. And probably more so because they can't do anything to come to your assistance and help you, right? SubhanAllah. So you have to take not only yourself into consideration, but you need to take them into consideration as well. And Allah knows best. One of the sisters said, I am worried for those ones because of the many scars, what they have, they want to start to leave Islam. This is extremely difficult, subhanAllah. SubhanAllah, we've seen that, right? We've seen that sisters have left Islam because of a bad marriage. But I need to tell you, sisters, from the bottom of my heart, it wasn't Allah's fault. It isn't Islam's fault. It may not even be your fault, right? It is the fault of the person who abused you, right? In those situations, you want to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more. You don't want to be from those who says, how can my Lord have allowed me to go through this? SubhanAllah, I can't even imagine what it feels like, right? I'm not in your shoes. I don't know. And I'm willing to admit that. But at the end of the day, wallahi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there for you. And inshallah ta'ala, just because this was allowed to happen because of the choices of this man, it doesn't mean that Allah doesn't love you. It doesn't mean that he was punishing you, inshallah ta'ala. But in fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala maybe protected you by helping you get out of that marriage. Maybe protected you, like this sister, by finally allowing a person to hear the screams and them calling the ambulance, inshallah ta'ala, so that your life can be saved. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still will continue to love you and still wants to be merciful with you, inshallah ta'ala. And I know it's difficult. I know that it may even affect your faith, inshallah ta'ala, but try to stay a person of faith. Try to stay connected with people of faith. Again, within that therapy that you may do, perhaps you may also have a session of spiritual therapy so that, inshallah ta'ala, the Imam and the psychologist together, they are trying to help repair all of the hurt, pain, and the struggle and the difficulty that you have gone through. And again, I can't imagine how difficult it is, and nor will I try to imagine how difficult it is, inshallah ta'ala. Only inshallah ta'ala. And this is why we pray, inshallah ta'ala, that Allah, continues to keep you all steadfast, whoever of you may be going through this. But know, again, if you are going through this, reach out for help. Call a hotline, call the police, go to the neighbor, go to your local mosque, inshallah ta'ala, call an imam you can trust, call up a sister to come pick you up. Don't stay in that situation, inshallah ta'ala, that is dangerous for your life, your health, and your faith. The last question, inshallah ta'ala, that we see here is that if she got married again but didn't want kids, again, would it be haram to avoid having kids? So it's not haram to avoid having kids. What has to be done, though, inshallah ta'ala, is that has to be communicated with the person whom you're sitting with for marriage. And if they agree, if they both agree, both spouses, the man and the wife, or the soon-to-be man and wife, husband and wife, agree that they won't have children, inshallah ta'ala, then in that instance there is no problem with not having children. They can practice coitus interruptus. They can practice using condoms, and in some instances they can practice the man going and getting his tubes tied, because in many instances now, depending on where you get it done, the reversal rate is over 90% for the man, inshallah ta'ala, where you can continue to have kids. So they can talk about all of these different things, and if both agree, then it's okay for them not to have kids. It's not haram for you to say, I don't want kids anymore. It's perfectly fine if that is what you choose, inshallah ta'ala. And one of the sisters says, Jazakallahu khair for answering the questions. May Allah reward you. Wa iyak, sister. Wa iyak, and alhamdulillah, may Allah reward you as well and reward all of us, inshallah ta'ala. And my hopes is, again, inshallah ta'ala, is that, through this journeying together again, and if you have any suggestions, inshallah ta'ala, as the one question that came in privately as to how we can effectively combat this stigma, this negative stigma of, not wanting to look bad in my family or ruin my family name. But at the same time, we're ruining people's lives. You can even email us at revertsreconnect@massnewyork.org, inshallah ta'ala. And we're open to all of your suggestions, inshallah ta'ala, to all of your comments and to any guidance you can help and provide us with, inshallah ta'ala. One of my hopes is that at the end of these sessions, this course should be about 9-10 weeks, just with the stories that we're going to be going through and analyzing them. And then my hopes is, again, that we can bring Sister Susie in, inshallah ta'ala. I'm going to reach out to her possibly next week to see if I can lock her in from now, and then bring in maybe some therapists and some psychologists to also talk about this, inshallah ta'ala, so that we can kind of draw more awareness to these situations. And if there's something that you feel we should be addressing, please as well send it to us, inshallah ta'ala, and we will try our best to make sure that we address it and not shove it under the table or push it under the rug or dip our heads in the sand, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah bless you all. May Allah keep you all healthy. May Allah give you lives that are, that you find tranquility, solace, and peace in your marriages, inshallah ta'ala. And if you have a marriage that is unstable, inshallah ta'ala, to the point of abuse, then get out, inshallah ta'ala. Allah has allowed you to get out. As the Prophet said, as Allah says in the Quran, keep them in kindness or release them in kindness, right? Keep them in kindness or release them in kindness. So with that, brothers and sisters, we look forward to seeing you all next week for this class. And tomorrow we'll be starting our first book club class, Women Around the Messenger, inshallah ta'ala. at the same time, 8 o'clock on the same channel, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan wa barakallahu fikum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.